Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to this little finale to this little Stephen King marathon that I've been doing. Today, me and good old Shawnee Boy.
Hello.
I wish we were using StreamYard so we can see that goofy ass smile you got on your face.
Well, all you have to do is just set up StreamYard, but you're too lazy to do so.
It's not that I'm lazy, I keep forgetting to use it. Shut up. Where today, me and good old Shawnee Boy will be talking about one of my favorite Stephen King movies, Frank Darabont's 2007 horror masterpiece, The Mist. Oh boy, are we in for a treat. So what's your history with The Mist, Sean? Because I got a lot to say about this one.
My history, I think, goes back to when this thing kind of came out on, DVD. So it was, I think I was finishing up, 8th grade or, junior, or, 8th grade at that point. So, and basically kind of, at the last day of school, myself and, several other kids walked over to someone else's, house afterwards. And then she was kind of having, a party. And then she's like, oh, we all got to watch this movie. And then we all started, watching, The Mist. And that's kind of, my initial origin for it. And I didn't really get to finish it because, I was off kind of doing other things and casually kind of watching the movie. But then, years later, I kind of got curious and decided to kind of watch the thing. And, a lot of people are always talking about the ending to this film. And then you watch the film, and, the film was fine. But then you get to the ending, and the ending is, such a... this is an example of a dark ending to a movie done right. This ending elevates the movie in my eyes. It's such a really, even Stephen King himself actually prefers the ending in the movie to what he did in the book, because he's like, wow, I wish I would have thought of that. Because Frank Darabont's a really good, he's really good at adapting Stephen King stuff. He's made 3 of some of his most popular adaptations. You have Shawshank, you have Green Mile, and you have The Mist. Hopefully he gets to adapt another property at some point. But
well,
what he would do.
It kind of seems unlikely because it seems like after The Walking Dead came out, Frank Darabont's just been kind of cut off at the knees, and he's never really had a chance to recover, as far as my knowledge.
Yeah, I like the first season of The Walking Dead, and then afterwards I just didn't really care as much. I think that's when Frank got let go, right?
It was around halfway through season 2 when Frank got booted out,
and unfortunately. That's kind of where I lost interest, so...
All right, so... my history with The Mist. So, Uncle Adam's here going to tell you a story. Ugh. The Mist is a very personal film for myself. Now, I didn't see this in theaters. I didn't even know that it was a thing until it was around 2016, I believe. There was I think on the Green Mile, there's a trailer to this movie, and it always intrigued me because it did look kind of interesting. A group of people stuck inside a store during some kind of monster apocalypse. It sounds interesting. But it never really caught my attention until around 2016 when I saw 2 videos. One was Eric Harrison from the Death Twitch Horror Review reviewed this movie, but more specifically was the horror guru who did an episode of blood-splattered adaptations of The Mist. It's a near 40-minute long video comparing the book, which I've never read, but I just know of it. I know about it, and of course the movie. That video absolutely captivated me, and it got me really, really, really intrigued. So I was working at the time, so I bought The Mist as quick as I could, and I sat down and I watched it as soon as I got it. We're not talking about what happens in the ending, but I just will say, by the time the ending came around, even though I knew what the ending was, By the end of it, I just went, and it was one of the most satisfying gut punch endings I have ever experienced in my life. Holy shit. But what made this movie even more special was when I brought my brother over. As soon as I saw the movie, because my brother is also a big fan of Stephen King, and he had never seen this movie beforehand. He'd seen Green Mile, he'd seen Shawshank, and he'd seen the original It and Stand By Me and Misery. So he's also read a few Stephen King books. So he's an avid fan. But as soon as I saw this, the first thing that came to mind is my brother's got to see this. So you're full of shit, Steven. Yeah, my brother's got to see this. So I made it like almost like it was a hangout day. Went out, got some food, and I picked his ass up from his mom's place. I dragged him over. We sat down and we watched The Mist. And I was like watching him watch the movie. He knew nothing about the ending. I was just watching him. And by the time the ending came around, I wasn't watching the movie. I was just watching him. And by the time it was over, the look on his face was similar to mine. And he just turned around and looked at me and he just uttered one word. Wow. And I just started busting out laughing because I was looking for that damn reaction. And I knew I was going to get it out of him, and I was not disappointed. I love showing this movie to newcomers to horror who have never seen this film before, just to see the reaction.
Like, there's some things you just want to get people's reactions to certain scenes. You have to kind of set things up. Another one.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll give an example of a movie that I like to show people. It's a comedy. You ever seen the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
No, but I've heard of it.
Okay, it's a really funny movie, but there's one scene in particular. It's like Michael Caine's character and Steve Martin. God, I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's one like part where a character kind of reveals themselves at the most unexpected time, and every time you show somebody that scene, the reaction is just like, "What the hell?" Or another example is the ending to Old Boy. I don't know if you've seen or heard of that movie, but
nope.
Old Boy has one of the most fucked up endings. It's even more fucked up than The Mist, I'd say. But it's one of those really messed up things. But yeah, like certain movies, you just want to get people's reactions just to see how they react to the ending. The Mist is one in particular. Like I actually like recently showed somebody like the ending to this, and their reaction was like, "Oh my god, that is like one of the saddest fucking things I've ever seen."
So my brother had a very good reaction to it. And my stepmom had a very good reaction to it. Meadow had a bad reaction to it. She thought it was one of the worst endings she'd ever seen in a movie in her entire life. She also hates this movie called, it's got Ryan Reynolds in it. I think it's called Buried.
Oh.
That movie is garbage because of its ending. This movie, because of its ending, is, in my opinion,
oh god, you disgusting slob.
About as good as that felt. No, I think
this. Can you go a video without like belching or farting or going making whatever weird obscene noises?
No.
No. Okay, that is kind of your trademark.
Mm-hmm. Along with the shades.
And laughing profusely at certain references in the sewer.
Anyway, so. Okay,
so references.
This is definitely one of my favorite Stephen King movies of all time. Yes, it's a fucked up ending. But my God, let's just talk about the plot. In Bridgeton, Maine, artist David Drayton, played by Thomas Jane, his wife Stephanie, and their 8-year-old son Billy. What is up with these Stephen King movies and having Billies?
Billy boy. Billy boy. Billy.
You say something, Billy.
Today, Junior.
Take shelter in the basement of their lakeside home during a severe thunderstorm, or the storm of the century. While surveying the damage the next morning, they notice a thick mist advancing over the lake. David and Billy leave for town with their neighbor Brent Norton to buy supplies. Inside the supermarket, they watch police cars speed down the street, and a terrified civilian, Dan Miller, played by Jeffrey DeMunn, a.k.a. Dale from The Walking Dead. This movie's got a lot of Walking Dead alumni in it.
I noticed that too. It's literally The Walking Dead cast just before The Walking Dead.
Runs into
Dale, you had
Andrea.
I'm sure you had Andrea, whatever the fuck her
Carol.
name is. I don't know. She died in like season 2, didn't she? 3, whatever. It's not important anymore. She didn't last long.
Which is weird because she lasted to the very end in the comics. Yeah. So Dan Miller runs into the store and warns of a danger lurking in the mist.
Carol's in there too.
Yeah, Carol's here too. Store managers Ollie Weeks and Bud Brown close off the supermarket, and the mist envelops the store. Against David's advice, Bagger Norm, a.k.a. the Shermanator, goes outside to fix the store's emergency...
I was saying that watching that today, I'm like, prepare yourself for Shermanation.
How the hell does he end up with Nadia?
I don't know, lucky bastard. Because he's the Shermanator. He prepares... You know what? We gotta talk about the American Pie movies at some point. Not the straight-to-video shitty ones, but like just the ones...
I've only seen 2 and 3, so I couldn't really give
Reunion's pretty funny. Sean William Scott is the best in those movies. Like, he plays the perfect douchebag. But anyways,
Norm goes outside to fix the store's emergency generator, but he is grabbed by a tentacled creature and dragged into the mist to have his ass terminated. David and Ollie direct...
Nick, you got it wrong. Shermanated.
No, because Shermanated implies something pleasurable, but he is not in the least bit pleasured.
Hey, you know what? The creature found it Shermanating.
Okay, fair enough. David and Ollie direct the customers to barricade the storefront windows, but one woman leaves to go home to her children, played by...
Carol.
Yeah, what's Carol's name?
I don't know. She's just Carol.
Melissa McBride leaves to go home to her kids. Mrs. Carmody, played by Marcia Gay Harden, very, very interesting name considering her character, a religious fanatic, begins preaching about an impending Armageddon, while a small group of skeptics led by Brent leave the store to seek outside help, which results in their deaths, why can't I talk, by monster consumption. David forms connections with several people in the store, including Amanda Dumfrey, played by Laurie Holden, a.k.a. Andrea from The Walking Dead, and Irene Repler, 2 teachers who come into conflict with Mrs. Carmody over her religious zealotry. Amanda carries a revolver in her purse and gives it to Ollie, who is a former regional shooting champion. As night falls, enormous flying insects, known as scorpion flies in the book, attracted to the lights of the store, swarm in front of the store and are preyed upon by pterodactyl-like creatures known as taro buzzards. One of the creatures smashes a window and allows the bugs inside. In the ensuing panic, 2 people are killed and another is burned to death in an attempt to incinerate the insects. Meanwhile, Mrs. Carmody is miraculously spared from an insect, leading her to what's this word? Proselytize, or is the act or fact of religious conversion. Basically, she sees that as a sign of God that she was spared by the scorpion fly, more fervently, and gain followers among the survivors. A small group led by David goes to the neighboring pharmacy in search of medical supplies, but they're attacked by giant spider-like creatures. I think they're called Gray Widows, that kill 2 men, forcing them to retreat. Mrs. Carmody, who had opposed the expedition, uses this failure to increase her influence by offering protection from divine wrath to new converts. Oh boy. The next day, following the suicides of 2 soldiers from the local military base, a 3rd soldier, Jessup, played by Samuel Witwer, aka Starkiller from Star Wars The Force Unleashed 1 and 2, reveals that a government project to discover other dimensions was underway at the base, and that the scientists may have opened a doorway into a dimension containing the creatures invading the town. Mrs. Carmody's followers offer Jessup as a sacrifice and expel him from the market, and he is unfortunately let down by his lack of force abilities and devoured by a giant praying mantis-like creature. Had to throw in a Star Wars joke there. The next morning, David and his group prepare to leave. Why couldn't he have just been pulled a Darth Maul or an Emperor Palpatine? Because Samuel Witwer voices Darth Maul in TCW, right?
Right. I don't really watch the show, but Nick, you gotta understand, I'm fucking Star Wars fatigued the fuck out. The sequel trilogy killed Star Wars for me.
Yeah, but TCW is awesome.
But the TCW, I don't give a fuck. Fuck you. That's right. Eat shit.
I already did.
You eat pieces of shit for breakfast?
Totally. The next morning, my son farts a lot, and I have to eat that.
I'd make a comment, but you know what? I'm not going to say any nasty things about your kid.
The next morning, David and his group prepares to leave the store, but are stopped by Mrs. Carmody, who demands that Billy be delivered as the next sacrifice. Her followers...
I keep saying your Predator helmet is moving in the background.
He's full of shit. Just ignore him.
Okay.
Her followers threaten Billy, but Ollie shoots and kills her in one of the most satisfying kills in any horror movie that I've ever seen. And forces her...
You killed her. I'm like, motherfuckers, you just stabbed a man and sacrificed him to a fucking, giant praying mantis monster. I mean, all bets are off at that point. You're literally advocating...
Well, with bigotry, it's like I say to Meadow, for when she says, "Whoa, a lot of anti-gay people like to watch lesbian action." It's just like I say to her, well, with bigotry comes lots of hypocrisy.
Okay.
It's true.
Yeah, there's hypocrisy all over the place. So.
And forces her followers to stand down at gunpoint. Outside, he and 2 others are devoured by the creatures, unfortunately. Bud runs back to the store while David, Billy, Dan, Amanda, and Irene reach David's car. Driving through the mist, David finds his home destroyed and Stephanie dead. Devastated, he drives away from town, passing a colossal 6-legged beast and eventually running out of gas. With no means of escaping the mist,
you can't even say it right now. He's get choked up.
Pretty much stranded in the middle of nowhere, because especially in the book, it's been established that the monsters hunt by scent. So there's no way of going outside and staying away from the monsters unless that involves lots of running and hiding.
Unless you pull a Jurassic World where you're like Owen hiding from the Indominus, where you like cut like one of the fuel lines or something underneath the car, just kind of mask your scent. So
I mean, I think that might have worked, but who knows?
Right.
So anyway,
before you get choked up.
With no means of escaping the monsters or the mist, David decides to end their lives. Taking their gun, there's 5 people left in the car, but there's only 4 bullets. So David decides to shoot his son and the 3 other survivors before leaving the car to be taken by the creatures. He hears a loud roar out in the distance, and he turns and he starts begging the monsters to come and get him. But out of the mist, as it suddenly dissipates, reveals not a giant monster, but a tank. A military tank with an armored column and vanguard in the process of exterminating the creatures and restoring order. Seeing that they have also rescued those from the store, including the woman who left to get her kids, David, realizing that he killed his son and friends for nothing and they were moments away from being rescued, drops to his knees and starts screaming in anguish over what he has done, ending the movie. Oh, dear God.
That music is the perfect music to end the movie on. I want to re-edit the ending to this movie and put that there, like, because there was a funny version I sent you earlier. That just makes me laugh. Somebody put like, as soon as the military tank pulls up, so they started playing like All Star Smash Mouth, and it's like as soon as you see the tank come into play, it's like
somebody once told me,
and you just have the music like playing. It's like the military's kind of blasting it to make sure, like, yeah, we did it. No, well, what's going on with this guy? Ooh, let's move on. What a big fucking.
So holy ending. Shit! What a fucking ending to a great fucking movie.
One of the best. I can't think of a better example of a dark ending utilized for a movie, because sometimes you get movies like Saw which have their twist endings, but like nothing that really sticks with you and works for the film like this one does. Seven's one example I think works quite well.
That's another one. Not in my opinion, not a great movie, but it does have a great twist ending.
Right. Her pretty head. Dun, dun, dun.
So, once again, like with Dr. Sleep, I'm going to save my thoughts on the story for when we get to our pros and cons. I just will say, what a freaking great ass movie. A great story with a great cast of characters, and it's just a very well-directed, well-crafted film. And nothing to be expected but from the work of a master, that is Frank Darabont. So,
Frank Darabont's an insanely talented guy.
Yeah, so. Frank Darabont, I think, is a very, very underrated film director. I have seen, of course, The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption.
I love Green Mile. Like, Green Mile is great. Like, Michael Clark Duncan is so good in that movie. You get choked up in that movie.
Aside from the 2 It movies, I'd probably say that is definitely my favorite Stephen King film. I don't give a fuck if it's nearly 3.5 hours long. It's so worth every single second of it. Mm-hmm. And Shawshank Redemption is also a really, really great film, and it's also another one of my favorites. That I have a hard time choosing what's my least favorite of the 3, if it's either The Mist or Shawshank. And I say least favorite lightly because that all three of Frank Darabont's movies I consider to be some of my favorites. It's though I think I see myself returning to this one. I don't really know. No, I think I'll say Shawshank. Yeah, Shawshank is my least favorite, only because I have the least amount of nostalgia for it. And I think it's also the least most rewatchable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's saying something because we're talking about The Mist.
I'm looking at Frank Darabont. He has not directed a movie since The Mist. The last thing he actually directed was like the beginning of like Walking Dead or like
yeah, like I said, AMC just fucking screwed the living shit out of Frank Darabont. I think he's done other work in Hollywood aside from directing since then, but yeah, it's a shame that the AMC screwed him over so badly. It's a real shame because I'd love to see him take on some more Stephen King stuff.
Right. I never realized he was a writer on Dream Warriors, and probably explains some of the why that's one of the best of the movies.
He also worked a little bit on the '80s version of The Blob too.
Yep, he did work on The Fly too. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
That's a good movie. The Fly 2, that is a damn solid movie. That's so underrated.
Right, and then you have I didn't really like Majestic. I think it's the only movie he's directed that I never really got into. But he should be. I wish he would direct more things. Like, he is very talented.
Let's see him do a Godzilla movie.
Well, you know what? He did work briefly on 2014.
I know. Or no, even better. Let's see him do a King Kong movie.
Right, because from what I gather, the scene that he worked on really was probably that opening sequence with Joe Brody and Sandra where he has to lock her in. That has Frank Darabont's fingerprints all over it. Like, I guarantee you that was him who wrote that scene, like the way it was in the script. Because he was a script doctor, and from what I've heard, like, he added like a really kind of emotional touch to it at that scene. So I guarantee you that was Frank Darabont who did that.
So with all that being said, let's jump into our pros and cons, shall we?
All right. Now, you and I briefly kind of talked about before we started recording what I should title this particular pro. But this pro is going to be called Great Apocalypse Dynamic. And basically, like,
phrase that I coined, you freaking
right, exactly.
turd.
Yes, you did, because I was talking like, what do I even call this, like, as a pro?
Yeah, the Great Apocalypse Dynamic. I will real quick. I will say, if you were to replace, this movie's story is very similar to a zombie apocalypse.
Right.
Simply
like
replace
or whatever.
Simply replace the zombies with these weird other dimension monsters. It still functions very well as it. If you were to take the, I cannot speak. If you were to replace the monsters with the zombies, this would go down as one of the greatest zombie movies of all time. And I kind of agree with what Adam Noyes said in his review. This movie feels like Frank Darabont was gearing up to start doing The Walking Dead.
I mean, hell, he brought back half the cast.
I know, right?
Except for Thomas Jane.
It's actually, it's a shame that as great as Andrew Lincoln is as Rick, it's a shame that Thomas Jane didn't play Rick.
I feel like Thomas Jane would have probably played Shane in that first season. Because, I mean, think about it this way. They both were the Punisher.
True.
So.
But yeah, this apocalypse dynamic is really, 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 really solid. This is how you somehow make an apocalypse seem big in scale when in fact it's only focused on a very small group in the greater sense of this. It's a little hard to describe. In the greater sense of the story, this feels a lot bigger than what it actually is when in fact they're focusing on such a small part of the apocalypse.
Right. I think like what makes this movie really interesting is it's just you have like these. It's really kind of not so much about like what's going on like outside the store is like the kind of tension going on within the store. It's just it takes like this monster like myth setting and uses it to kind of tell the story of like what people kind of do at their most desperate. Just having a bunch of like desperate people crammed into your like do different factions start to form. How do people kind of change over time? Now, I'll get into some of that when I get to my cons because I feel like some aspects of it are really kind of rushed after like the timeline only implies just a couple of days. But I like to see like how people are kind of like change their different factions, how people kind of snap, like how like people can get when desperate, and just kind of like how people change in the mist. Like it's not just the monsters outside; it's the monsters on the inside. that counts. Like, who are the real monsters in the mist?
Yeah, which is something that Frank Darabont took from the original Night of the Living Dead, which he intentionally shot this movie to be similar to. Even though I disagree with this saying, I respect that Frank Darabont is trying to stay true to his roots. George Romero stated multiple times in his zombie movies that the true threat is not necessarily the zombies, but how people react to them when in desperate situations. And in that aspect, this movie pulls that off perfectly to a T. There's maybe one aspect that is just a little shaky, but overall, Frank Darabont did a really, really good job of making this movie feel so impactful when focusing on such a small part of the apocalypse. It's genius, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's pro number one, I guess, for both of us, is that great apocalypse dynamic, which is the phrase that Nick coined. Just so y'all are aware, Nick coined that because I was struggling to come up with a name with it, but Nick coined it right there. Full credit right there. Hashtag shut up, Sean.
Yep.
So the next pro I have is the creature Carnage, and kind of the creature designs too, because like Frank Darabont like went out of his way to kind of do stuff that wasn't really kind of going on. I honestly feel like this is kind of like the influence for Stranger Things and a lot of the creature designs in that TV show, because I feel like this is kind of like that's like the designs in these various creatures. Yes, a lot of them are kind of familiar, but there's also some kind of like crazy looking creatures out there. And I really like the violence. Just like there's those weird, like bird-looking things, not that eat the insects, that rip the guy's neck skin off. And
yeah, the taro buzzards.
Yeah, you have the little tentacle monster which rips the Shermanator's chest.
Like, that effect is just gnarly.
No, like there's some really cool, like grotesque, gory sequences in this movie, and I especially like love those bits. But like ironically, like the most heartbreaking scene in the movie, you don't really see it, which makes it all the more effective. Mm-hmm. It's kind of left to the imagination, like the way it's shot right there. No real like music on display right there. There is music, but it kind of only plays like towards the end of the movie.
It's played in 3 key scenes. Another key,
and I love that. I love that track too. And it just like if you want like dark tragic music, that music is dark tragic music. Like when a character has to fall to their knees and scream no, that's the music I expect to play going on there. That's actually one of my pros right there. Pro number 3 is the music, and it's not
lack thereof.
Yeah, because the score, there really isn't much music throughout most of this film, but like
at least music. 2/3 of this movie are totally silent when it comes to music.
Right, and when it actually is utilized, it's utilized quite well, especially at the ending. Like it rips right. It is a gut punch of an ending, like a very dark, tragic ending, which can be memed and kind of poke fun of a bit, which I kind of done a few times. But like the first initial time you see it, you're like, oh fuck. Like that's one of those endings you're like, oh shit, like we done fucked up. Whoops. Like it's just one of those real gut punch of an endings. Pro number 1, 2, 3, 4 is Thomas Jane. I think Thomas Jane's a pretty good underrated actor. He doesn't really get he feels like a leading man who's never truly been this big, huge A-list star.
Sadly.
But he can carry a movie quite well. Like he's very versatile. He can be versatile as an actor. And like if you need like kind of a solid, like main protagonist, I feel like Thomas Jane kind of is that guy. He's never really been bad in anything I've seen him in. I liked him in The Punisher. I've liked him in a few other things, but like I always do enjoy when Thomas Jane shows up.
He's good in The Predator.
Yeah, he's good in The Predator. Like he's.
Hey, how does that feel? A gun.
Yeah, see what I mean. Thomas Jane works quite well. He can be quite versatile. Going to the cast, a lot of the other supporting characters are, good, solid actors that really make the film feel real. Like they feel like real everyday people. They don't necessarily feel like people reading lines. A lot of it feels kind of natural. Some bits don't. I'll get to that when I get into the cons. But there is a pretty solid supporting cast in this thing. And then lastly, my final pro what else can I say? I love the ending to this movie a lot. Like, I think the movie itself is kind of fine with some good stuff kind of like sprinkled throughout. Not like my favorite thing, but I love the ending. Like, I think the movie's fine, but then I love the ending, which really kind of like pushes it over the edge a bit. I think this is one of the best endings. Really one of my all-time favorite movie endings, all things considered, like, because it's just one of those things that just kind of sticks with you. It comes out of nowhere. If you're not like, people's reactions to seeing it the first time is truly awesome. It's like when you get like a big twist ending that nobody really sees coming, and then when you finally like see it unfold, you're just like, wait, what? Like if you show somebody the movie Old Boy or Sixth Sense, if they've never seen it, is one where people just like their jaws kind of hit the floor. I think this is just one of the strongest endings to a horror film I've ever seen. So kudos to Frank Darabont. Like, he hits you with a gun, but it also has kind of like, it's kind of like a tough life lesson about like never really giving up and how salvation can be just around the corner. Because they were there. Like, isn't that just kind of crazy and ironic how the one woman who went into the mist by herself ends up being like one of the people, like when Carol, I'll just call her Carol, from Walking Dead, when she goes out, like nobody else would help her, and Thomas Jane at the very beginning, he's just like, no, I'm here to protect my son. Ironically, she comes out completely unscathed, finds all her kids, and it's Thomas Jane who shot and killed his only son that's just left miserable at the end of it. Like, isn't it crazy how that just all kind of came to be like that? Like, it's one of those dark, tragic endings that you just feel
irony.
The irony is ridiculous. So, yeah, that's crazy. But anyways, go ahead, sir.
So I have 10 more pros to talk about. Pro number 1 is this movie's cast. Stephen King definitely likes ensemble casts.
This is true. And
this is probably the biggest cast in the smallest scale film that I've ever seen, because there's tons of characters in this movie. You have David, again, played by Thomas Jane, who, again, he's a really, really solid... This movie's cast is just full of a lot of actors who are the type of actors like, hey, I remember that guy from that one movie. Can't remember his name, but I remember him from that movie. They're, you know, those actors, right? Like,
right. Like, hey, you're that guy. Hey, you're that guy from V.
Yeah, right.
What's up?
This movie is full of those characters, and it's also full of a lot of Frank Darabont regulars. Like Jeffrey DeMunn is a Frank Darabont regular. Can't remember this guy's name. Let's see. He plays the dad in The Green Mile.
I can't remember. I haven't seen Green Mile in a long time, but I remember Sam Rockwell, Tom Hanks,
William Sadler. He
oh, he's Death, isn't he?
Is he dead?
No, I meant he plays Death in Bill and Ted. Is that Williams the one I'm thinking of? Let me take a look. I think.
Yeah, he was Death in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
Yes, he was. Oh my God, it is him. Oh yeah, that's right. He was also wasn't he also the villain in Die Hard 2 as well?
Yeah, he was Colonel Stewart in Die Hard 2. William Sadler, he's another he's another Frank Darabont regular.
I love him as Death. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of like really good B-list actors in this movie. And it's a great cast. They all have really good chemistry. They all interact very well with each other. They play their parts well. They don't. I wouldn't be surprised if this movie's script, dialogue-wise, was more just like an outline. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of ad-libbing or just like improv in this movie. These guys feel like real characters, and that's something I will say. I love the small town aesthetic of this movie.
Right, like one thing that King is good with a lot of his stories, like he really captures the small town feel. With really so many of his movies, like you got It, Silver Bullet. You really feel like you know the area, you know the locations, you know the people. It in particular, like I feel like I know all the kids, I know everything about the town. I have like an idea of the geography of it all. This movie in particular, you also really feel like you kind of know everybody in the town. Like everybody like feels like they know each other. Like it feels organic when they're interacting with one another. Like it doesn't feel like people who just met. It feels like people have known each other for a really long time.
Yeah, people know everybody, and everybody knows a little bit of everything. Like, you have those that are good mechanics, those are good with firearms, those that are good with like engineering, those that are good with medicine. Everybody knows a little bit of everything, and it's a really, really nice sense of camaraderie with the characters. Again, it goes into that small town feel. And when everybody's working together, the camaraderie and the chemistry is very, very strong, and you can't help but feel swept up along with that. Like, if you were in these characters' shoes, you'd be doing everything you could to help out in this situation. And it's really engrossing and very entertaining. And again, well written and very well acted. Nobody, well, in my opinion at least, nobody really gives a bad performance. Speaking of which, pro number 2 is Miss Carmody.
Oh.
Now, keep in mind that yes, her character is absolutely despicable, but you can't deny the actress playing her is doing an A+ effort and is nailing the character 150,000% of the way all of the time.
There's certain characters like I don't know. I just like found them considerably just like anything involving the religious stuff. I just audibly groaned while rewatching this movie. Like, I guess that's the intention to make them really annoying, but I'm just like it.
Yes, it is intentional.
It just in those ways that right. It just felt like watching douchebags in like a typical like slasher horror film. Like, it didn't really like. I just like just move on from these people. Like, they didn't really keep me engaged. Like, there's certain people like characters I can like despise on film. Like, an example is like the guy like Mick Taylor in the Wolf Creek franchise. I've never hated a villain more than I have that character. I've never wanted to see a character get killed off more than that. But like, that's their job. That's their intention. Like, they do a great job playing it. Here,
like Miss Carmody. In my opinion, that's exactly what Miss Carmody is. She embodies. Now, I'm specifically talking about the movie version. The book version, she's despicable, sure, but it's just not quite as over the top as it is in the movie. And it certainly will not. Like, there's 2 different examples in Stephen King movies where a religious nut job is engrossing to watch, and it's over the top and done well. This is the good version. Carrie's mom in the original Carrie film is not necessarily a bad version, but she's so over the top, it does come off as being comedic because of how ridiculous it is. No, Piper Laurie does a really good job playing Carrie's mom, but that version of a religious nut job is played so over the top, it does come off as being comedic.
Here, I would rather have that than this. Here, it's just annoying. Like, I'm just like, ugh.
I wouldn't even say that it's here. I don't say it's annoying. I say that it's very, very, very well done because it's so spot on what Frank Darabont was trying to convey. So she is pretty much a female version of what the hell was his name? What the hell was his name? The leader of that church. Fred Phelps? Fred Phelps? Was that it?
Fred Fox? Wait, no.
No, not that. Yeah, Fred Phelps. The pastor of the Westboro Baptist Church. So, for those of you who don't know, quick history lesson. Back in, was it the 90s or the early 2000s? I can't quite remember.
Phelps.
Okay, hang on, guys. A little bit of unconventional.
Yeah, nobody likes the Westboro Baptist Church.
Hang on, let's get into them. Hang on, just let me do my thing. Okay, so in the late 90s, there was a boy named Matthew Shepard who was a 21-year-old gay boy who was, well, not boy, I should say. He was a gay man. In 1998, he was found tied to a fence post in Wyoming, found beaten tortured, mutilated, and left to die tied to a fence post on the side of a road. He was discovered early in the morning, rushed to a hospital, and later died of his wounds. His funeral was greatly protested, led by Fred Phelps from the Westboro Baptist Church. It was Fred Phelps that came up with the infamous slogan, "God hates fags." At the time, this case grew lots of media controversy because at that time, being killed for being gay was not considered a hate crime. Since then, of course, and due to this case, pretty much any kind of violence towards someone who's gay is considered a hate crime. If you spit on a gay guy, it's considered a hate crime. You punch a gay guy, it's considered a hate crime. If you kill a gay guy, that's considered a hate crime. Well, first off, how the hell was that not considered a hate crime? But whatever. That's how it is now. And instantly, Fred Phelps became one of the most hated individuals in the media's eyes for all of eternity. Worse than Hitler, potentially. Worse than fucking Miley Cyrus or Justin Bieber or that bullshit.
How do we go from Michael Phelps, or not Michael? Wait,
yeah, totally, Michael Phelps.
Wait, what did I say his name was?
Michael Phelps. Like, you know what I mean? He became one of the most hated upon individuals in the media for all time. And
Fred Phelps, goddamn, why did I say Michael Phelps? I'm sorry.
So, and Mrs. Carmody is pretty much not specifically a gay hater, but she's pretty much a female Fred Phelps. She embodies the type of religious nut job that, Jesus Christ, who the fuck is texting me?
I always say religious nut job, you're immediately going, Jesus fucking Christ. I know, just that transition. Yeah, but yeah.
Hang on. She embodies the type of religious nut job that blames whatever minority they deem to be hated upon, worthy of being hated upon, as the reason for supposedly some kind of wrath brought down by God. Oh, a giant superstorm just swept through New York City. It's because God hates fags. Oh, we have a giant virus going around destroying the world. It's because God hates trannies. Not saying that to be derogatory. I'm just trying to make a point.
All right.
You see what I mean, right?
Nick. Yes, I get your point. Quickly, bite your tongue before you actually say something really stupid.
That's why I'm trying to move on.
Right.
Mrs. Carmody, I hope that the actress isn't actually like Mrs. Carmody in real life, but she does a fantastic job portraying this character. And actually, I can't believe I forgot to mention her as one of the top 5 most despicable Stephen King villains in all Stephen Kingdom. I would actually say, I don't know, like Pennywise will always be the best, but she's kind of tied with Annie.
Oh, Annie's great. Like, Annie is on another level.
I don't know. It's really debatable. But yeah, the actress does a phenomenal job portraying this character. She's totally believable as a religious nut job. And every second that she's on screen, you can't help but be engrossed, at least in my opinion. But you're also you cannot wait for her to get her comeuppance. And when she's finally gunned down by Ollie near the end of the movie, you feel this massive relief released off your shoulders, and you're just like, thank you. So Mrs. Carmody is a fantastic villain, one of the best Stephen King villains of all time, and almost is the highlight of the film with how well she's portrayed. Moving on. Let's see. So, and this will lead me into pro number 4. Sean and I were talking about this beforehand. Is the great bullshit Christianity in this movie is just so well done. This is, to to quote the horror guru, it's more so done in the book, but I still say in the movie, this cult that Mrs. Carmody starts up, it's very Lovecraftian, with like you'd almost expect these guys to be sacrificing people to Cthulhu or some of his monsters with how they talk and how they act, with sacrificing people to monsters. This, and Sean and I were talking about this. It seems like in a lot of Stephen King stuff, Stephen King loves to shit all over religion. Like Carrie's mom.
I definitely have noticed a pattern. Like there's a lot of like really like crazy religious based characters in a lot
Carrie's
of his
mom
films. And I mean, think about it. Well, you have this, you have Carrie, you have Silver Bullets, and then you have several others that just, it has some of them in there too, because you just kind of always have to have that in there. It just seems like he does that a lot. What other ones did he do it in? I'm sure he had several other adaptations, but those are ones I can think of off the top of my head. But he tends to write that type of character a bit. So, I mean, to be fair, like Stephen King has written so many novels that like, I mean, you're bound to kind of repeat things after a while. Maybe he doesn't even realize he's written, like, maybe he might even like come up with the same character name that he didn't even realize he wrote in another book.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I don't think he does it intentional.
Right. It's just one of those things. Maybe he has to like, maybe he has like a little like log of all his different characters. Like, okay, did I do this yet? Oh wait, yes, I did.
Well, I'm sure by now he does something like that. But anyway, so this bullshit Christianity showcased, it is over the top, but it's kind of scary with how kind of there's elements of it that do feel very realistic. Like there are some religious people out there that twist the Bible around in such a way for it to meet whatever kind of agenda that they want to showcase. Like I'm sure that there was some kind of religious element to Charles Manson. That's for damn sure. There just the bullshit Christianity in this movie, it's in my opinion very well done because of how freaky it is. Like damn, it makes you think, would people go this crazy religious whack job so quick in an apocalypse? It's scary to think about. To go on another brief tangent, one of my favorite zombie novels is called When There's No More Room in Hell. It's a 3-part zombie apocalypse series. There's a scene where the narrator is talking about the worldwide effects as the zombie apocalypse gets worse and worse. In one case, they talk about a town that was taken over by a religious nut job, and they were under
Children of the Corn. That's another Stephen King one.
Yeah, there's a big one actually. But they were under the false impression that sacrificing people to zombies was a way to keep them safe. Of course, it ended up biting them in the ass, but it's freaky to think if a zompoc was to actually happen, surely that type of shit would happen at least once or twice. And it's freaky to think about.
People are insane. I mean, people do stupid shit like that in general. Like you see it in plenty of movies.
And to talk about one of the themes of the movie, it perfectly showcases that in desperate times, people look for scapegoats. And when people are scared and desperate, they will just search to anything that solves the solution. It's like what David says in the film. You take away the ability to dial 911, you turn off the lights, you scare the shit out of them. They will look to whoever they perceive to have an answer. Whether that answer is wrong or right, we don't know. And in this case, it turns out to be very, very wrong. What the hell are you doing?
I'm just putting my phone on the charger because it's over there. What are you doing? Go ahead and get pro number 5,000 or whatever.
Shut up. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pro number 5 is the music. Pretty much what Sean says, the or the lack thereof, because at least, like I said, 2/3 of this movie is silent. The only scenes were There's one that I can't quite remember if it has music, though I'm pretty sure it does. It's when the tarot buzzards and the scorpion flies break into the store. During the pharmacy, I do remember trying to see if there was music, and there is. And then, of course, in the last like 15, 20 minutes of the film, there's that really long, haunting, angelic choir that plays that just also helps to make the ending such a gut punch. That music is absolutely phenomenal. Who did the music for this film?
I actually listen to that track from time to time. Like if I just need to listen to like I have a playlist on, I have a privatized like playlist on YouTube for like sad, emotional movie music. Sometimes I just need to listen to something like that. I'll put on one. That's like one of the tracks I have on there. So it's a great track.
The music it was done by Mark Isham, who also did the music for The Hitcher and Point Break. I think this is his best work. Like I said, the end track is very haunting and it's very just bleak and dark. And the other two scenes with music, the music is very subtle, but it does help accentuate the action. And that's really what music is supposed to do. It's supposed to help supplement a film. And that's great. Not much to say about this music, partially because there's not much music to speak of. But also, a lot of the movie is musicless, and I appreciate the film for that. It feels real, because in real life, of course, during an earthquake or a natural disaster, there ain't no damn music, and it just helps to make it feel more real.
Yes.
Next pro is just overall the story of this movie. Like I said, it feels like a zombie movie. Just replace the zombies with freaky ass interdimensional monsters.
And the Shermanator.
It's creepy, it's tense, it's well told, and it just, in my opinion, it's well executed. The story is really solid. Next pro, I think the pacing is overall very good too. I will admit, this is pro number 7. I will admit that there are some moments when the pacing almost gets to be kind of draggy. This is mostly when after people come back from the pharmacy. That quick scene from there up until the morning when everyone decides to leave the store, that's probably my least favorite section of the film. And this is when Starkiller gets sacrificed too. Like that whole section is my least favorite of the film, because that's when the pacing does start to run a little bit out of steam. But then the ending comes along and makes up for it. But overall, I think the pacing is very good. This is a bit of a slower paced film, like how slow Sean's face looks right now.
Well, I'm just letting you ramble on for 45 minutes while I just sit here. So go ahead.
So I'll just say, yeah, I like the pacing for this movie. I think it's very well done. And again, I've said before, I'm not a big fan of slowly paced films, but this is a rare exception. Pro number 8 is the monsters. I love the monsters in this movie. There's not like one singular creature. It's like literally a hole was ripped into an entirely new world, and its entire ecosystem is just flooding our world. There's lots of tentacled and insect-like monsters that permeate this new world, and there's a lot of good variety. The scorpion flies are freaky as fuck. The tarot buzzards are nasty little bastards. It's actually a shame. Huh?
The Kraken thing.
The Kraken thing is great. And they're all really, they look kind of Lovecraftian.
Yeah, it definitely has a Lovecraftian feel with a lot of the horror to it. So,
and the design of that giant beast that David almost gets stepped on near the end of the movie, that's got a freaky ass design. They don't show that much of the monsters, but they do show enough of them to get the point across that, yep, shit's hit the fan. And this will lead me into the next pro is the special effects. For the most part, the special effects are really solid. All of the practical effects are top notch. This
right, the practical effects look great. It's when things have to be fully CG where we get some issues.
We'll talk about that. Of course, because this is Frank Darabont, who the hell else do you think did the special effects other than Greg Nicotero of K&B Effects? All the practical stuff looks great. The blood looks really good. The carnage looks really good. The creature carnage looks really good. Like there's one scene where Kira from the Chronicles of Riddick gets stung by a scorpion fly.
Oof.
Within minutes, it looks like a bee sting on steroids. Her throat swells up to the point where it looks like she swallowed a basketball. When the Shermanator gets attacked by the tentacles, there's like these really massive suction wounds on his leg and his chest, and they just look gnarly. They spray blood all over the place. One tentacle gets severed, and the digital effect of it melting doesn't look that great, but when it gets poked and prodded and it's flailing around,
there's a lot of digital effects that don't look that great.
That looks really good. When the tarot buzzard gets set on fire and crushed by David, that looks really good. The best practical effect in this movie, in my opinion, is the dude who got burned. I thought he was a legit burn victim for a second when I first saw this movie. His burn wounds are very, very realistically done. Like a lot of times movies tend to just have them be overly charred, which is not really how intense burn victims look. It's like a reddish dark color. It's like a really bad blister. And all of his burn wounds looked really, really, really well done. Like I've seen actual burn injuries, and like a level 1 burn, just your skin is really red and it just looks like a big blister. A level 2 burn is when you have flesh that's just seared and charred away. But a level 3 burn is when it's burned down so badly it looks like a burnt steak. It's not completely black. There's nasty bits of red flesh in there, and it looks gnarly to touch and move. And this guy, the burn effects on him are really, really, really well done. And it's no surprise when it's revealed that he dies of his burns halfway through the film, because he just gets coated in lighter fluid and set on fire. And
I love how casually they put him out too. It's just like, I don't know, like just the way it's kind of done. Like he's just like, he has to come to the realization that he's on fire, and then like they just like, there's no mad rush to put him out. It just like,
and something that drives me nuts. Does nobody ever remember the stop, drop, and roll technique?
Right, like it just, it's kind of one of those things. It kind of made me think. You ever see the movie The Ninth Gate? I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
Like there's a scene where Frank Langella, basically the plot of the movie is like, you have like Johnny Depp playing this like book collector who's trying to find these 3 books, and if you get like certain pages from each book and put them together, it gives you a gateway to hell. So like Frank Langella or whatever's in it, and he thinks he has the 3 books in the proper order, and he thinks he's like worthy to go to hell or whatever. So he sets himself on fire, and he's so casual about it, like, look at this, I'm on fire, I feel nothing, this is great. He literally dumps gasoline on himself. He's like, wow, this is amazing. Like I'm totally immortal now. And then he's like, oh shit, oh god, I'm burning. It's really stupid, but like it's just kind of like, well, the movie would have made me think of that, because like at first he's like, oh yeah, I feel nothing, I'm casually on fire. Oh shit, oh god, oh no, this is a terrible idea. So yeah.
And my last pro, I got rid of 1, so I just chopped it down to 10 pros. The ending is just phenomenal. We've already talked about it, but the ending is just absolutely amazing. Yes, it's fucked up. Yes, it's bleak. Yes, it's dark. Yes, it's a total gut punch. Yes, it's a shot in the balls. But fuck me, is it just such a phenomenal ending. And it's really respectable that Frank Darabont had the balls to actually do something like this. And contrary to what some people may say, well, it's not like how it is in the ending to the book. It was inspired by a piece of text from the final paragraph in the book, because the ending in the book is it ends with the characters just being kind of stranded in the middle of nowhere. They have no gas, barely any food, barely any water, and they're just holed up inside an abandoned hotel. But David is writing down what's going on in a journal that he found, and he says, "I have 3 bullets left over in the gun, but I'm not worried. In the end, if it comes to it, I'll kill my son and then figure out a way to off myself. But for right now, I'm gonna kiss my son goodnight, and then I'm just gonna fuck with the radio again." So it was inspired by a piece of text. And yes, Stephen King actually came out and said that he prefers this ending to his ending to the book. The ending to the book isn't necessarily bad because it does leave the characters.
It's kind of like the Jaws ending to the book, where the Jaws book ending just kind of like anticlimactic, doesn't really leave a lasting impact. Whereas like the movie version, it's like, I don't care if it's not realistic. Like, you got to have an exciting climax.
I don't think it's anticlimactic because I like that it's a bit eerie, leaving the characters' fates kind of ambiguous.
Uh-huh.
But it definitely does feel like Stephen King just really didn't know how to end it, so he just ended it. Whereas this is definitely a very, even if you don't like the film and you don't like the ending, you sure as hell ain't gonna forget it.
Oh yeah, you're never gonna forget this one.
So, do you have any cons with this film?
I have a few cons I can get into. Do you have any cons?
I have no cons, but I have 2 nitpicks.
You know what? Let's start with your nitpicks. We'll finish off with me this time.
Okay. So nitpick number 1 is, yes, some of the CGI is kind of shaky. Overall, though, when the creatures are in CGI, I don't think it's really that bad because this movie didn't have a gargantuan budget. It had only an $18 million budget, in which it definitely made money. It made $57 million in its box office run. Though it definitely was the least success. Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't think Shawshank made that much money, but this one just seemed to kind of come and go the most of all 3 Frank Darabont's movies. But the CGI when the monsters are showcased using digital effects, sometimes they look pretty good. Like the Tarot Buzzards look good, the Scorpion Flies look good, and some of the Grey Widows look good. Oh, and of course that giant praying mantis creature looks good, but only because...
Honestly, one of the best use of effects was when the one guy was in the pharmacy and he was like, the spiders were bursting out of his chest. Like, I think it was a combination of CG and like practical. That looked really disgusting.
Yeah.
But that was quite good. That was a good use of the CGI.
But there are other moments when the CGI just looks a little cartoony. Like there's one scene when Jeffrey DeMunn's character impales one of the Grey Widows and he like lifts it up with his stick and you can see this cartoon spider blood just spitting out, and it just looks really cartoony and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And also all of the baby spiders looked pretty cartoony. Like the scene when they all burst out of the dude's back when he finally falls and dies, that looks really good and it looks really gross. But when they're all swarming all over other characters, it's very obvious. It looks like a digital effect and it looks cartoony in 2007. So I don't think these CG effects are bad all the way through, but it is definitely kind of hit or miss. And nitpick number 2, I feel like there's not enough time spent in the store. I feel like, though, that was done on purpose to keep the momentum of the story going. But this movie takes place over the course of only 3 or 4 days, maybe 5. And it just feels slightly rushed that there's damn near a Lovecraftian cult created in this apocalypse in just 4 or 5 days. I would have preferred had it taken place over the course of a few weeks or a couple months to make the situation more desperate. There's less water. There's less food. People are starting to run out of just supplies and situations are getting more desperate. And people are starting to go also a bit more stir crazy because they're stuck inside this place. They can't leave, but they can't stand each other. So it just feels a little rushed. And then at that point, too, after a couple months, it would have made more sense for there to be a Lovecraft cult coming out of this shit. Not over the course of 3 or 4 days. It just feels a tad bit rushed. But that's all I have to say. Those really don't even affect the film for me, because they're pretty minor in the long and the short of things for myself. But I guess Shawnee Boy has a lot to say, so let's get into that.
I'll keep them too quick. Number one for me is the pacing of this movie, because like you were kind of mentioning earlier with when you're talking about how the pacing you like for the most part, but there were kind of time frames in the movie where it definitely seems to kind of drag, like after the pharmacy and all that. Like I think upon like rewatching this movie again today, like I just kind of like felt like I was sitting through this, and like some of it just maybe kind of dragged for me because I really just kind of wanted to get to the ending. Because like it to me is the most interesting part of the film, because like there's time spent in the store where it just like, I don't know, it's like nothing too really engaging kind of happens throughout like certain points in the movie. It's I'm just kind of sitting and kind of like talking about things, and like there's moments where it kind of works, but then other times I just kind of find myself a little bit like checking my watch, like, hey, can we move on along just a little bit? But that also can kind of be considered another con too. Is con number two I have is the religious crazy lady and this ridiculous cult that forms within a span of like 3 days. Are you fucking kidding me? 3 to 4 days, you're telling me like everybody completely like abandoned any sense of like morality. They all completely turned to this crazy woman and formed like part of this cult where they're just like, oh yeah, we're gonna kill this guy. Some dude stabs a guy, mind you. He stabs him a few times, then they all like, throw him out there. Yeah, like 3 times. And again, the religious lady who completely ignores what the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill things. So a complete hypocrite who doesn't really understand what the fuck she's talking about.
Like I said, with bigotry comes hypocrisy.
Right. Completely insane, stupid people. And they're like, you killed her. Well, shit, you killed somebody earlier. You were celebrating that. This cult, if they would have been, like you said, if it would have taken weeks to kind of get to this point, I would have been more accepting of it. But because of that, it just feels too rushed. It doesn't feel natural or organic. It gets kind of cartoony. Like that the lady just feels so out of place in this thing where she just kind of gets to that point. But then again, there are people like the Westboro that are kind of like that. So I don't know. I just got to the point where I just audibly groaned when this character showed up. I guess that's kind of the point. Mm-hmm. But I'm just like, it just felt like such a drag on the movie for me, because it's just like, oh, I've seen these in so many Stephen King stories, and I'm just kind of sick to death of them. Like there's like no nuance to them. It's just so one dimensional with the way they kind of act towards things. I've just kind of seen it before, and I just don't really care for like cults in movies, because at least in this one they get their comeuppance, but like in a lot of films, like you'll see kind of like those movies, like what is it, like Wicker Man or Midsommar or whatever, or Hereditary. Well, you have these types of characters who are like part of a cult, and really nothing happens to them. At least in this one, something does. So I'll give that. The next con I have is the bad CGI. There's instances where it's okay, but then there's times where like you'll be having these really kind of serious conversations with people, and then you'll have some really cartoony looking visual effects that completely take me out of like the seriousness of the scene. No,
I actually think the weakest CGI effects are the tentacles.
Yeah, the tentacles look really bad, and it kind of felt like at some points, because the CGI is in there, like it felt so out of place with everything that's going on. Like the actors didn't really feel like they knew where the tentacles were. Like you'll get actors who know how to act with CGI. Like Brendan Fraser's an actor who you really feel is there with like a CGI character. Like this movie, it felt like they didn't really know how to act with it. Like the tentacles are kind of going around doing their things, and the actors are acting like they have no direction at certain points. Like what do we do? Like, or like when Thomas Jane's like swinging the bat around, like it just doesn't feel like they had enough time to sync up the CGI and the actors like quite well enough. It just felt like they never really kind of matched, like they were in like the same scene together. Now the practical effects look great, but a lot of the CGI stuff, it just felt kind of really out of pace at times, and it definitely helped kind of like take me out of the movie a bit. I feel like they need to do it a little bit more time to kind of fine tune and refine some of these effects. It's not quite as bad as, say, like the Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns. But I'll say that about that one. That one's so cartoony but that movie's kind of a fun, goofy movie. And at least the characters felt like they were really kind of interacting with something there. Because you have like actors like Brendan Fraser who know really how to like use their imagination and act with CGI characters. Whereas this one, it felt like a lot of the actors were not really kind of used to that type of acting, so it felt kind of new to them. Like they couldn't really. They're more like dramatic actors as opposed to kind of using something like, say, what Brendan Fraser would do in like The Mummy, where he's used to kind of acting big spectacle and stuff. So like, it didn't really feel like.
Damn,
none of them
dude,
really...
you're making me want to watch The Mummy.
Fuck, I want to watch The Mummy again. I watched that movie several times this year. I love the Brendan Fraser Mummy stuff.
Then get me the hell out of here.
Yep. But
moving
think
on.
Of my children. But think of my children.
You don't have any children.
Someday
I might. Shut up.
We got to talk about the Mummy movies at some point. So yeah, that's one of them.
How about next week?
Perhaps. We'll see. I mean, I love the Mummy films. Okay, and then my final con. You know what? I kind of have two a bit. Like, so, kind of going back to the way things are kind of rushed. I felt like there wasn't much in terms of like me really kind of knowing who the characters were. Like I feel like I forget most people's names. Like not everyone kind of really stands out in this movie. Maybe because it's like a really large cast, and it's not really that type of. It's not really a character-driven story. It's more of a like an action-driven story, like where like the mist itself kind of drives the narrative rather than necessarily like the characters themselves. If that kind of makes sense. It's a what's the word I'm looking for? Character-driven. It's story-driven.
There you go. Yeah.
Character-driven. That's the word I'm looking for. So you don't really like I don't really remember like anyone's names kind of after watching, because there's so many people kind of thrown into this thing, and like I mean I just kind of the only way I remember them is like by the actors' names themselves. So like that's just kind of how it is for a lot of people in this thing. Like you have trouble kind of remembering everyone's names, at least from my perspective, because there's just kind of so many characters thrown in this thing, and because the movie's only 2 hours long, we're not given enough time with every person. But then again, I'm also complaining about the pacing, so it's like pick your poison thing. And then my final con is unintentionally bad acting. There are times where the reactions from some of these actors are just unintentionally hilarious. Thomas Jane has a few of those moments. I love the gut punch of an ending, but the way he kind of cries, like I found myself laughing.
It's a little goofy.
It's a little goofy. You'll kind of have instances like early on with some of the overacting, like religious people, like the one guy who just completely snaps and changes sides. You're like, yeah, kill him, and like just the reactions to certain things, like the screams and all that, like Thomas Jane's grunts and throughout sometimes. I don't know, like he's good through a lot of the movie, but then there's times where like when he has to like cry and scream that I found myself laughing. Like I couldn't help myself. Like it's a very good gut punch of an ending, but like I also kind of like laugh at it. It's kind of the same thing with the movie Seven, where Brad Pitt's like screaming, "No, what's in the box?" Like, and it's like, "Oh no!" It's like it just kind of makes me laugh. Like I'm kind of cynical that way, where I laugh at like stuff like this, but like it kind of takes me out of the movie in a lot of ways. What's that?
You sick bastard.
Oh, I'm the sick bastard. Meanwhile, you're belching, farting.
I haven't farted a single time in any of my videos. What the fuck are you talking about?
That we know of. You belch really loudly.
That's part of my freaking shtick, dude.
That's part of my shtick.
So let's wrap up our thoughts on The Mist, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I feel like I've said everything that I need to say.
All right. Well, go ahead and give us your final thoughts on The Mist.
Final thoughts on The Mist. I think it's a solid Stephen King adaptation. Definitely kind of far removed from like some of my favorite stuff. Like the only thing that really kind of elevates this movie for me per se is the ending. I think it's well crafted for the most part. Like there's some good emotional beats in there. There's some things that kind of take me out of it. Like the religious cult just makes me audibly groan while I see it. And they're not even really kind of fun. They're just kind of annoying the whole way through. Like I don't necessarily like scream like I hate these people. I just get them off the screen. That's kind of where I'm at with them. The score, like when necessary, like when utilized, is quite well. The endings got that gut punch there. Like I said, The Mist, I think it's a fine movie. Definitely not one of my favorites, but the ending is one of my favorites overall. So if I were to give it a rating, the highest I could go is thanks to the ending that elevates it to a 7 out of 10.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, that's because of the ending. Otherwise, it'd be like a 6.5, or like a 6.5.
My final thoughts on Stephen King's The Mist. This is a masterpiece, in my opinion. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite Stephen King horror and general films of all time. Though I will say this is not a very rewatchable movie. You can watch it maybe once a year.
It doesn't really have that. After rewatching it again, I'm like I don't really have like the urge to kind of go back in and watch it again. So anytime soon, like I'll watch the ending, but like I don't want to sit through the whole thing again necessarily.
This is a phenomenal movie. Not very rewatchable, but just because something isn't very rewatchable, that doesn't make it bad. So I love this movie. I give it a perfect solid 10 out of 10. I highly recommend this movie. It's definitely one of a kind, and it's definitely an unbelievable and unforgettable experience. So post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. Go check out Shawnee Boy's channel, and hopefully next week I'll get my plans more in order. That way I'm not going to be so wrapped up in a whole bunch of drama and bullshit.
Yeah, something like that.
So look forward to that. And as always, go out, and if you see a big giant bank of mist coming towards you,
get the fuck out of there.
Run. And I will see you guys in the next video.
As always, take care now.